Do you ever see yourself doing this, like working in research and working in transforming research and working with professors and transforming that into ventures?
I wanted to be a coach, literally. Not a football coach, just a coach. And then in secondary school, when I went to boarding house, I took it up. I'll go to boarding house with 13 noodles of gari and kuli and sugar. Then we'll contraband muftis. Then when I get into school, I'll sell those contrabands to students to get cash or for food. So I'll say those were my early intros into being entrepreneurial or business. I've always wanted. I had a goal. By the time I was leaving secondary school, I wanted to live with 500k. That was my target.
Secondary school?
Yes, that literally. I didn't make it, but I left with 250. So that was.
There is this misconception, or there's this idea that researchers and professors don't make good founders.
Yeah. They can't be good entrepreneurs because they read and they dish out. They read and they dish out. They are teaching you business, but they've never run a business.
A lot of the research that we see today are just papers for research purposes, just for research sake. Like professors say, before this year runs out, I need to write 20 papers. And there is no deep word implicating effects of the writing of the paper.
Primarily is you get your promotion by how many research you've done. On the basis of that alone, there is no incentive for a researcher or for literally our lecturers, as it is, to do any other thing aside from scholarly work. They just have to do it, else they remain stagnant. And there's a period there's a number of years you are at that level with no research, you're just kicked out of the entire system. Yes.
Why is it that a professor that is being paid a salary and decide to go and do research and all IP belongs to university, and the only time he could venture outside of that is if he's as an independent research lab?
If tertiary institutions can be more flexible in terms of their IP policy, say a more percentage of the share goes to the researchers themselves first. I think that would very much incentivize them, knowing that it's a win for either both parties.
So to get started, I'd like to say, let me brag about you a little bit. You know, you are fondly called the Prof.
Yeah.
And you are currently leading ecosystem strategies and venture management at Innovate Hub.
Yes, Innovate Hub.
You have an MBA and years of experience building entrepreneurship capacity across Nigeria. You've pioneered university-based startup programs that merge research, innovation, and entrepreneurship, especially in the northern part of Nigeria. Your work connects academia, investments, and government to transform student research and professional basically research commercialization into scalable ventures. All right. So we were having a conversation at an event and triggered me to say, I think it's going to make a lot of sense for us to have this important conversation recorded. And I think it has a lot to do with the work you're currently doing, or the work you've been doing all your life, especially connecting academia to venture. Can you shed more light into who you are, what you do?
Like you've bragged about me. Let me use your words. That's practically what I've been doing. Started off from students primarily, how we can connect. It's just my obsession around how theory can become practical, literally. We've had a lot of theories being taught at us, pushed at us. And then we are seeing that as much as we are churning out, should I say, intellect, we are still seeing a country and an economy that does not reflect the amount of intellect. And then my brewing passion for entrepreneurship and startup ecosystem and the knowledge around it then drove, say, okay, how can we start now? And so we started out as practically being a student, first of all. And at that time was gathering, should I say I was privileged to be one of the best. And so it meant that in my cycle, I had literally people who were passionate about academics. And so how can we take this passion and translate what we are learning, this is what we're hearing in economics classes. This is what we're hearing in business classes. How can we translate that into proper ventures and grow? So we started out by having our own businesses. And so I can say my first business was while a student. And before I graduated, I had like 4 businesses already established, literally. And that sponsored me into having another degree. So I went back again to study entrepreneurship as undergrad, practically. And from there, you grew up. And that process continued, got retained as a lecturer. And okay, great. An opportunity to then say entrepreneurship can be practical. And so we started our first sort of startup innovation lab on campus where we take...
Which university is that?
Veritas University.
Okay.
Where we take students who literally are pursuing research. We're just your normal, say you're doing a project, right? And so how can you translate that into practical venture building? And grateful enough for the VC to give that sort of open arms for that to happen. And we pushed that until now, where I'm now doing it with the academians themselves, the professors, the doctors, and we're now translating their own research into commercialization. And the entire ecosystem or this particular research commercialization just shows a sheer gap that genuinely needs to be filled. You have, on an annual basis, you have over 2,000 research that are H-indexed, right? Let's leave those that are not even H-indexed. Over 2,000. And WIPO says only 10% of that has had real commercialization pathway. And if you go by rankings, just by churning out of publications, globally, Nigeria is 58.
Okay.
Globally. But if you bring it down to say, what has that translated into practical? We're now 168. And so you see the gap that as much as we're churning out research, we're not translating those research into actual commercialization. And so that's practically how I would say the journey began from as a student and now my love in doing what I'm doing now.
That is beautiful. I wanted to go more into like background. You know, you talked about when you were in university, you had the opportunity but do you ever see yourself doing this, like working in research and working in transforming research and working with professors and transforming that into ventures?
That's from growing up.
From growing up, at any point in your life, you're like, this is what I'm going to do.
No, I would say I never knew it to be what it is now, but I know that my first jam, I didn't feel it because I didn't see the course I wanted.
Nobody saw the course they wanted.
I wanted to be a coach, literally. Not a football coach, just a coach. And it was practically just help coach people. That was my passion. And so that's how I didn't enter university in the first year after secondary school, because there was nothing I was interested in and everybody had opinions about what it was. And so I would say, but from growing up, I grew up with my mom being a business person. She was a civil servant, but we had poultry, anything called agric.
She was involved. So we literally were self-sustaining plus selling. So it's not just for home use alone. We sold bags to people, and we also had shops. So selling provision store and all of that, just to keep. I mean, we were 6, only her, so we had to keep ends meet. And so that's what I say was my first intro into business. And then in secondary school, when I went to boarding house, I took it up. I'll go to boarding house with 13 noodles of gari and kuli and sugar. Then we'll contraband muftis because my mom was a teacher, so they won't search me. Yeah.
Then when I get into school, I'll sell those contrabands to students to get cash or for food. So I'll say those were my early intros into being entrepreneurial or business. I've always wanted, I had a goal. By the time I was leaving secondary school, I wanted to leave with 500K. That was my target.
Secondary school?
Yes, that literally. I didn't make it, but I left with 250. It was literally, that was my target. So I think I have been business oriented from the get-go. Transactions was, I want to sell something and get value. This is the value, give me money for it. Was literally, I would say, that was it. And that was the reason why I would say, after my first undergrad, I went back to study entrepreneurship.
Oh.
Since there is now, I mean, I didn't know anything. And business admin wasn't what I wanted to do. I needed something more streamlined than being holistic. So it was mathematics, first undergrad. Then went back when I heard, oh, there's entrepreneurship. Oh, good. So let me go and see what entrepreneurship is. And it's in the study of entrepreneurship, I wasn't still satisfied because practically till date, I still argue with that. I don't think it's something that is taught at undergrad. I think it's supposed to be a postgraduate course. And so I needed more nuance around it. Then I said, oh, okay, let me go and do an MBA. And I chose not to do an MBA in a Nigerian institution because, I mean, it is what it is what it is.
Yeah.
And then my MBA now opened me up into startup. Oh, so there's this word of startup. What exactly is in it? Then I got the opportunity to do an internship with Global Ventures, based off in Dubai, and one of the early founders for Money Point, as we know. And so in that as well, I realized that my passion wasn't for the Series A, already growing or trying to expand. I needed grassroots, let's get our hands dirty kind of thing. That's one. And two, I've always been pro-nationalists in that sense. How do we make Nigeria great? And of course, I now know that it's no longer by the fancy, let's just copy and paste kind of startup. We need research driven. And so, okay, how can we then do research driven entrepreneurship? So that I say, as growth and age and time was passing, it was just layer upon layer and knowledge upon knowledge that led to where I am today.
Oh, that's wonderful. There is, so to put some context, in countries like the US and the UK, we see a lot of university professors or students come up with massive research and pair up with someone and build a startup out of that.
Yeah.
And then we see what is happening with what's his name again? Peter Thiel program in universities, for example, in Waterloo University, where you are given a portion, an investment to leave school to continue what you're doing. And when we look back to Nigeria, right, we see situations where a lot of universities have actually churned out pretty good founders. People can point their fingers to the likes of OAU, to the likes of Unilag, and to the likes of Covenant University, for example. But regardless of all of this, I don't know if this is like a publicly known, but in the conversation I've been having prior to now, is that there is this misconception or there's this idea that researchers and professors don't make good founders.
Yeah, true.
Right? Researchers and professors don't make good founders. So anyone that is involved in research doesn't make for a good founder. So the misconception that founders, researchers, either professors or student researchers don't make good founders. Yeah. They don't make let's not even say startup founders. They don't make good enterprising entrepreneurs. And then the next important topic is a lot of the research that we see today are just papers for research purposes, just for research sake. Like professors say, before this year runs out, I need to write 20 papers. And there is no deep word implicating effects of the writing of the paper, right? In my time, I have had the opportunity to read papers. On the 5th page, I just know this guy is writing nonsense. This guy is just writing paper for paper's sake, right? There is really no deep research. There is just explanation and explanation, tautology, filled up to like 45 pages or 120 pages. And that now brings an knack. So basically, are we trying to rank up on the word research ranking by just churning out nonsense that does not have any real world implication? And is that the reason why everyone thinks that researchers could that be the reason why researchers are not good entrepreneurs? Basically two questions.
So let me start with almost the easiest, which is what we're trying to do, whether we're just researching for publication. To unlock that bottleneck, it's going to be a long while. Because primarily is you get your promotion by how many research you've done. And so that's standard currently within our tertiary institutions across globally, literally. There are only 2 ways you get promoted. They say you do a community service. And so that has to be impactful to the entire community. And that requires money. Or you, every 3 years, you're expected to have a highly international journal publication done. 3. And so on the basis of that alone, there is no incentive for a researcher or for literally our lecturers, as it is, to do any other thing aside from scholarly work. They just have to do it, else they remain stagnant. And there's a period there's a number of years if you are at that level with no research, you are kicked out of the entire
really?
system. Yes, you are kicked out of the entire system. And so, first is that foundationally by structure, that's what it rewards. It rewards the amount of publications you have, and not the amount of practical work your research have been able to get. And so, we need to have a separate policy conversation with the right people in the room around that. But what we see happening over time is that interested researchers are trying to marry both, where they still are fulfilling the bit of doing publications and then trying to get research actually into commercialization. But I think it's the same thing we see with technical founders, right? I'm sure you're familiar with them. They are enshrined and married to the software, to the coding. And so typically what makes them good is the fact that they got a very good co-founder to help them in that bit. And so I think for the researchers or the student researchers who are yet to find that marriage to happen, where as a researcher, the typical truth is all their lives, they only know by the books and not by practical, we've tested it. You don't expect that person to make a good entrepreneur.
True.
Typically. And so the only way we can have that come out into full, say, growth stage, startup or venture is if there is a marriage with a co-founder, where we have, say, organizations like Semicolon trying to do that, where they do matchmaking for researchers to get into. And so I think that's the direct answer to both, is that by structure, that's the only way they get promoted. That's the only way they remain relevant within their space. And they have to do scholarly research and publish. And on the other hand, they can't be good entrepreneurs because they read and they dish out. They read and they dish out. They are teaching you business, but they've never run a business. And the only thing they know about business is what so-so-so said in 1982, is what this other person, that's all they know. And so we need to be able to treat them as how we've treated our technical founders, where we got the co-founder and merged them, and then they built a very successful ventures.
That makes a lot of sense, actually. So what's the biggest mindset shift needed to get Nigerian students or professors, or like a student that is looking at a professorship career, so start thinking like innovators and not just graduates?
We currently run a program that's at Innovate Hub. That's literally trying to address that. It's literally a 2 weeks program, genuinely a mindset shift. And I would say the biggest challenge has still been around what we just finished speaking about, the reward system that already exists. Primarily because, one, for many of these researchers, to be able to convert their research into actual commercialization, it's going to take a lot of infrastructure to be in place, because they typically would end up being deep techs or hardware solutions. And then you now know how the ecosystem is, especially for emerging market like us, around deep tech and hardware solutions. We barely even have where they can actually have that in place. What we see in the entire market and ecosystem as SaaS software, like asset heavy, as opposed to, because they are researchers, so they are in lab. Let's pick the average. They are in the lab, so a lot of testing. Even as a student, if you did any lab-based project, you are either sending your samples to somewhere in South Africa. So already within our institution, we don't even have the proper facilities to cater for that. And then you now want to commercialize that. Let's just be writing the papers. I don't know if you get the drift.
Yeah, this is easier to achieve compared
to this. Then you now go to the researchers who are engineering. What do you want them? We're still doing assembling. So what then do you want them to genuinely innovate or commercialize from their research? And so as much as you can preach the gospel of research to commercialization and show them the pathway, there still needs to be a sort of backward integration to ensure that, say, institutions like NASENI are properly in place and in shape to receive an offtake, and we have more literal maker spaces across. I mean, the maker spaces space within Nigeria is literally slim.
Yeah.
There are no proper maker spaces we have in. So if we have those places that does the full integration to get these researchers on board and open them up, and even within our own institutions that are trying to open up innovation labs, say the likes of CU, now university, if the universities too can be incentivized to say, let's open it up beyond software-driven innovations and do proper. So we are ensuring that our labs are well equipped, we have the infrastructure. I think if those backward integration infrastructure are in place, we would have more incentives and more students, researchers, or actual lecturers see that mindset shift in place.
Sometimes when we have conversations about, important things like this, I like to try to veer away from things that we have no power over or control over, in order for us to see, like, where can we see the instant sign of success or progress. Now, this conversation around how do we ensure that, we just talked about what can be done. Like, if they were like in an ideal world, what can be done to ensure that there are instant show of success that we can reference? Example, let me give you an example. People that are involved in researching for things like, mathematicians or computer science guys or people in biotech, and they can research something that can be implemented so easily without the need for a laboratory. How can we push for more of solutions where we do not need infrastructure development to achieve?
There needs to be off-takers. That's one. So even if you do the biotech side of things, we genuinely would need, say, big corporates to come in place to be able to offtake those solutions themselves. Because at the end of the day, these researchers, like we've agreed, can't genuinely be entrepreneurs. And so do we have enough spaces or platforms where we can do sort of an entrepreneur in residence for them, and where we properly do matchmaking? And then we are able to merge them with the people who have the zest and the zeal to run it as a business. That's one. Two is, even if we want to do things beyond our control, there are certain things that are still impossible. Let me give you a practical example. The average, any lecturer, as long as you're working with an institution, you're a public servant, you can't be involved in the operations of a business.
Oh, really?
Yes. The same way civil servants can have business. It's the same way they can't. They can only be consultants on a consulting firm or venture into agriculture. But doing so, want to commercialize. So even them, what's now the incentive for it?
We're trapped at this point. I didn't know that. I didn't know that if you are like
you genuinely can't. So it's as bad as there are certain institutions that own 100% of the IP.
Even though the research for years was done by the professor.
Yes.
All right. So we have a systematic problem. We have a system problem.
So literally, we have to be able to, that thing that we're saying is not in our control. We have to bring it
in our control.
Into our control. Because even the researchers know that. I've read a lot of IP policy documents by institutions. It's literally line for line where you see, even if you use a book in our library,
it belongs to you.
It belongs to the institution. The IP of that invention.
Yeah, I think there are some organizations, even some startups that have it like, if you were writing code for your own project, as long as you're using our space and our electricity and our
it's
internet,
just the same
belongs
thing.
to us.
So the researchers too in themselves are thinking, if we are only to do a research and say we come up with a biotech solution, and because we are not entrepreneurial, the likelihood is that one great biotech firm comes, offtakes it, and gets the license. For them, if the institution is the owner of the 100% IP, what the off-taker is coming to take is license, which is literally the IP of it. The researcher who was behind that has zero to nothing in it. So why will he want to undergo that process of trying to commercialize his research when he knows at the point where money is to come in the institution?
I'm not involved anymore.
I'm not involved. Likewise, the students. And so that's major bottleneck. Is literally a major reason why I would say for us in this part, we're yet to genuinely see that. And the best we can do is have these conversations ongoing. And hopefully, I would say, get the right people in board. If we're saying what are the immediate things we can do, have a policy, the NESG and the likes, PI, Policy Innovation Center and the likes, get these people in the room, and let's have a conversation about IP at the institution level. How do we break the stronghold that institutions have to these IPs? That's one. And then let's have corporates. I know the likes of Wema Bank, Zenith Bank are doing hackathons and the rest. Why not the cost groups, the Dangotes, come in board and say, oh, with my petrol, my business in fuel or in cement, I want to concrete, for instance. There are concrete tests that we do. And the literal manner way it is done now is going to take about 2 months for a test of concrete to come out from the lab. There are researchers who can simply go and come up with innovations around that. So Dangote can decide to say, you know what, I'm throwing out a competition for researchers, go into the lab and show me a proper way. But corporates still are gearing towards hackathons, doing rather than that. And so I think these are the low-hanging fruits we can begin to address and engage.
I was watching a show on Bloomberg. And there was this concrete that I saw that can absorb CO2, and they're looking at in the next future being able to, like, the jungles, the concrete jungles could also be jungles that could absorb carbon dioxide from the atmosphere, and also there was even a research on concrete that could heal itself by absorbing water. And then keep rehealing itself, so that way crack and stuff can be healed. That is what we see outside. I think before we even talk a little bit more about that, one thing I want to understand is why was this law or this system put in place? Because whenever I see there's a policy in place, I just want to understand why. Why is it that a professor that is being paid a salary and decide to go and do your research, and all IP belongs to university, and the only time he could venture outside of that is if he's as an independent research lab, where either philanthropics support the lab, and then he can be able to, we could say logically because resources are provided by the university, and so they want to have playback into that. And we see that right now that has basically stifled the actual growth of innovation. From this, what do you think that a university can do to, if we are looking at IP, we can decide to generalize it, or we can decide to say a university, if we do not want to see this as a centralized situation where it's a centralized, let's us change the IP policy across Nigeria. But what can a university that wants to, or a Veritas or a Covenant University, what policy can they change where they can see a lot more results or much more innovation come from them and still be a win-win with them still involved?
I would say still back to the two things that we're trying to veer away from, which is infrastructure and IP, right? Make it flexible, because let's be honest, even in corporates, right? They'll say whatever, when you're leaving a corporate, they say every single thing you've done, send it when you're doing offboarding process. So it literally means if I wrote a letter or I changed the style in the letter, there's a non-compete policy involved in it. So I think generally within as long as you are working, there is that place where whatever you do within your time spent in that organization remains and is owned by the institution or by the organization. If tertiary institutions can be more flexible in terms of the IP policy, say a more percentage of the share goes to the researchers themselves first. I think that would very much incentivize them, knowing that it's a win for either both parties. That's one. And two, what happens on a licensing, or what happens when we ourselves decide to go into full commercialization? We need to break that down into granular forms so that the researchers see more reasons why they should go into research, knowing that there is a win for them. That's on one end. Two, I would say NUC or whoever, the body in charge for what happens to public servants in themselves in terms of trying to commercialize. Because as opposed to developed countries where their researchers make a lot of money from sitting in advisory boards and consulting, we don't have that here. Which obviously I believe is the reason, if you go by our track record, it's the only reason why we just copied and pasted and say the only thing you can do is consulting as a lecturer or as an academician. We need to be able to allow them sort of also be able to have a skin in the game in the business. We can restrict them, say, because you don't want them to be distracted from their actual lecturing and doing the research. Restrict them to not being involved in the day-to-day business, but could be co-owners or shareholders, but not. And so if we break down that policy to permit that, you then now know that, okay, I'm a researcher, I can go do my research, come up with an innovative solution. I own part of the IP, and I also own equity shares, and is known to the public, as long as I'm not involved in the day-to-day runnings of that business. If we adjust these two things, I believe we'll see more and more more researchers come out with more innovations. And I would say if we add the other factor of corporates, they are the only ones who can offtake at this moment.
Yeah.
If we add corporates who come in and are willing to offtake, believe me, that 10% that we've had in terms of research to commercialization would increase.
I believe so as well. When we look at like the process of off-taking research into commercialization, I remember the story of a founder that was telling me that he worked with a startup, a well-known startup, well-funded startup in Nigeria, and the founder called all of them to the conference room and said, everyone is free to innovate. Everyone is free to research. If you are coming from the incumbent, the big guys in the market, you know that your IP belongs to us. Yeah. But there's one thing we're going to change. IP belongs to you. But by so doing, by using our resources and working with us, we have the first right of refusal to offer an investment.
Okay.
So it's more like, if you want to get funded for your product, we should have the first right to decide how much we want to invest and at what term.
Yeah.
And then the minimum we're going to take is 20% to 25% of your equity. If you want us to come multiple times, we can come multiple times. And his startup basically was like a shootout from the company. And he was able to publicly let people know that on his lunch break, he's working on it. On work vacations, he's working on it. Yeah. The company is fully aware that he's working on it. And the company, see, if you need the help from anyone in the office and you want to co-found it together, please go ahead. Yeah. Right. And then the founder basically, I was like, that is a smart move.
Yeah, sure.
Right. And so many of the product they have today, some of the product they have today were basically their own staff that decided to take on ownership of products, launch it. Right, and then basically relinquish full access to the company. Yeah. But the fact that they have this at the back of their mind that I can start something I don't feel that is not mine. The sense of ownership allows you to want to explore and want to do a lot of things. Yeah. So with what you said, the way I see it happen is private universities that do not have to talk to NCU, NUC, or talk to the government to implement internal processes.
Given the fact that institutions are also sort of like, should I say, operates with a free trade zone kind of arrangement.
So, exactly. Yeah. So let's just say, for example, a Covenant University that say, hey, all professors now should research any real life problems, use all the equipment in the universities to do that, and can co-found businesses. The only term here is that we have X stake regardless of what you want to do.
Yeah.
As long as you have a contract, you are fully employed,
Yeah.
we have a 25% stake, whatever it is you want to do.
Mm-hmm.
So even if you want to go and get founded somewhere, whatever it is you want to do, we have a stake. That will basically, in my opinion, like a massive level of incentive for founders, for professors to start to think, what can I do that will change the world? What can I do that my name can be on it and I can patent it and I can say I did it?
True. And true. As long as, I think, even in terms of trying to ensure that they are not distracted, somewhat of what we started when I was in Veritas lecturing was when we wanted to start the Startup Innovation Lab and we took in students. The question was, what happens with their regular lectures and grades? And one of the things we ensured is a little drop in your grade will literally kick you out. And so, as much as we're going to cut some slack for you in terms, because you are in innovation lab, your lecturers know, they don't expect to see you every single time in class, but you are not to drop in your grade because that's a reflection that this is affecting. And so we kick you out. Of course, there are warnings. We ask you what's happening. Is it too much? Let's reduce the workload and your time commitment. If these same universities could sort of create systems where these are the metrics where we would know that distraction is happening in terms of your fulfilling your primary responsibility, then we either first warning, second warning, then we just shut this down. It gives both parties the assurance that, you know what, in terms of having a world-class lecturer, you still have him and he's still doing his job, but he's also trying to ensure that, which is another alternate source of revenue for the institutions themselves at the end of the day. And we all know it will also increase their rankings globally, I would say. So that would merge, or that would sort of safeguard both sides on ensuring we have more researchers going into commercialization, and we still have our lecturers doing their lecturing jobs.
Lecturers. The popular story of Warren Buffett trying to get into Columbia University because he read a book about on investment, and that book was written by an actual lecturer in that university, right? And we sit on board and all of that. And it's more easier for it to say, I want to learn this thing so desperately. And I want to learn it from someone that has written a book about it. But that person is not active in real life.
True.
In the sense that he is not interacting in real time with the concept that he's writing about. So it's basically just churning out theory to you to go figure out if it's true or not. Now imagine a situation where Nigerian professors are actually involved in venture building and I'm a professor in biochemistry and I did something 5 cosmetic companies are using it. I'm now confident that whatever it is I developed in the laboratory is actually being used in real life. And then if I write a copy or a book about it, people will trust the book more.
True.
And people will say, I use a cream or the soap or whatever it is that this biochem developed or this whatever it is, and that add more like credibility and value to whatever is being researched.
Sure.
There's one thing you talked about, like university student and your system in cutting professors and students out of the program when their stuff drop. How do you approach like stakeholder collaboration, like the mentors, the funders, and then the policymakers to ensure that this student or professorship, entrepreneurship system work?
So for the student one, I would use past experience. Part of the program we ran literally inculcated mentorship. And so for whichever, should I say, sector you are interested in, we were able to get mentors who mentored them for the period of a year. So they literally had sessions, virtual sessions for those who would meet with them virtually, or physical sessions for those who would come physically. It's genuinely part of the entire, it's like you're running a bootcamp, but this time is within your 1 year while you're still in sessions or within semesters. So that's why we invited them. And for investors, we did what we call a demo day. So we, at the end of the 1 year, because it was annually, at the end of that 1 year, whichever ventures for the students were ready, we did a showcase and we did the demo day. We brought in the right stakeholders, investors, funders who are interested, and then they got funding for that. Right now at Innovate, it's the same thing we are doing. where we literally have boot camps where these researchers come. There are 2 weeks in a month. They are accommodated and they meet with hands-on, both technical and then business venture building mentors to mentor them. And at the end of their program, we have a demo day and an exclusive deal room where we've matched make this funder is interested in this is the thesis, so these are the ventures that relate with that thesis, or even grantors or developmental institutions who are willing to give grants for more R&D in that sense, or corporates who are willing to take off. So these are the ways on both sides. I would say my experiences have seen how we're able to bring in other relevant stakeholders into the room throughout the entire process.
That makes a lot of sense. How do you see, what do you think success looks like for two people, for the student researcher and for the professor researcher?
Commercialization, that genuinely is the end. But I would say a mindset shift is the first, right? Where my greatest joy, or one of my greatest joy, has been several feedbacks from lecturers who would say, now we've gone back to our institutions and we're now literally telling our students to no longer just give us paper as their project work. They genuinely have to go into society and communities and find what's the problem that genuinely exists. And even if for now it's just the paperwork, but they know that they can be a follow-on to that paperwork. And so what we are seeing with that is that we're having lecturers who are no longer just interested in just scholarly work. They are interested in ensuring that as much as they are doing scholarly work, it is need-driven and not just, oh, this is my research statement and these are my objectives. It is need-driven. That alone shows that it's just a matter of time we would have that. And so I would say progress in that has been a major success for the program. And then right now, I can say in the past 6 months, we've had, from Innovate Hub, we've had about 8 to 10 ventures who are currently speaking for grant funding and for offtake. One lecturer is currently speaking for an equity, because people are willing to come in and offtake. He's having conversations with to get his license with WHO because it's health related. And so these are success stories. And if you know how the startup ecosystem generally blew, is the fact that one success story ensured that, oh, this guy was in campus with us, so obviously we can. So I think that with this success, once we are able to publicize this entire success, we'll have more researchers interested in following up.
This concept is still at the infancy across Africa. Because I believe that CCUB is doing something like that as well. In my last conversation with JFK, and it's actually something that should be tapped into like seriously. Investors should see it as a way to ensure that there's a constant deal flow for them as well. How can universities adopt the research to market model that you've championed? If you were to like, in a few words, say this is in the model. That if in university, it doesn't matter how big or small you are, you can adopt this. You could say this is the benefit. This is how you can get more students start to think of their education as a solution to real life problems and not just education to get a job.
Tango for CCMAS, and so before we were using a different kind of curriculum, which made that it was all dished out into us by NUC. The new curriculum, which is now called CCMAS, meant that 60% is from NUC. The institutions now have the free will to change 40%.
Oh, that's good.
What that means is if institutions can tap into that 40% and ensure that there's a change in their curriculum where literally what you want students to do in labs and practical are need-based problem. You've already begun as little as that. And so your first day in class, you're just generally saying anything about biology or chemistry. And then what are the problems? You're doing general design thinking model. If you inculcate that, and then, we're going to go through the various testing. You are inculcating real world live problems into. So because you are incentivized to do that within curriculum, that alone would culminate in saying from year 1 to his 4th year or 5th year, the student is graduating with something that has the potential to go into market, and as a prototype. I would say, I think Covenant University is almost at that part, because I remember I had a stint in Covenant University, and my first year, 2 weeks or so into class, I was doing ICT. The lecturer said, what do I have on my phone? What are the features on my phone? And what features would I love my phone to do that it's currently not doing? And in my 4th year, he wants to hear my actual solution.
Oh, wow.
So that alone gives that you are lecturing, you are doing a different subject, but there is a problem that you have given me to solve, and you've given me a time bound. That alone in itself is literally the research to commercialization. And if institutions can inculcate that and say, when we receive our 100 level students, we want them at 100 level to be able to know what it means to identify a problem, and let's do market validation. That's all. In 200 level, we go into the lab. In 300 level, when you're going for your IT, awesome time to go and take your prototype and test with real world value. At 400 level, your project, you're building it itself. That alone, it's research to commercialization.
How do you see your role, or the role of Innovate in all of this? How do you see it evolve in the next 5 years?
Being to be involved in policies first.
It's very important.
Very important. We've not been. So right now, I would say internally, we're even trying to come up with more policy briefs and have policy roundtables and conferences. So at that point in time, we need that unlocked. And 2, preach it so hard that other people are willing to come on board, either open their own. I mean, Innovate is just in Abuja.
Yeah.
And so we need more maker spaces, literally. And so be able to preach that gospel about research to commercialization so that more maker spaces are interested. The likes of our labs are willing to come out more and do a lot more. 3, I would say get more corporates involved. And so that we have the offtake. Because if it's for supply side, literally there are a lot of research lecturers. Currently, as we speak, we have 55 that currently are
in just Abuja here or in the north?
No, we have 55 that are currently going through a bootcamp now.
Wow.
As we talk, as we speak. 55 before. So between October and December, we're going to have 55 times 3.
Wow.
Lecturers. So the supply side is huge. Is now on the offtake side. That I say in the next 5 years, we need to be able to say 10, 20% within a year have been able to go actually into full commercialization. We can point with this venture, I think in the next 5 years, that's where I see us going. And then we should be able to point how policies and dialogues have come out through our entire conversations.
If you could redesign the Nigerian higher education system to fuel innovation, what would you change first?
Entrepreneurial centers. Generally, most institutions now have what they call EDCs, entrepreneurial development centers.
Yeah.
And so let's stop making confectionaries. That's probably what currently just happens in EDCs, literally.
It's not actual, how do you develop actual solutions to problems?
You just go there, you see we have a lot of sewing machines, you have baking, they are doing fruit juice. Come on. That's what you learn in vocational trainings.
Yeah.
So there's no need for that. I think that's the first place to start. If our EDCs, if there's a reorientation in what actually an entrepreneurial development center should be, it would change the entire campus and the institution as a whole. That would be my first point of contact, I would say.
How do you see that affect the outcome in 5 years? If you were to say, they're vocational centers, right?
Yeah.
So all universities, as long as you are in universities, your EDC should not be making chin-chin, soap, and zobo. You should be actually looking at actual entrepreneurship training. What impact do you see that have on any student that go to the EDCs?
So first is that every student across the country in his 4 or 5 years has 2 semesters where he would do a general course on entrepreneurship. It's in the curriculum. And so because your EDC is doing chin-chin, that's what they are now teaching you entrepreneurship. And so if the EDC has changed, it means that because you have to pick a skill you want to learn. And so if the skill you want to learn is in tandem with what the EDC that has changed, it means that give or take of every 50, 70,000 graduates that we're having churning out, you would have a couple of them that has somewhat been marinated with an actual EDC. That's one. Two, I know Cisco, there are very few institutions where Cisco is not running a program right now. And it's literally compulsory for students to have a Cisco certificate at the very least.
Yeah.
And so with that, you are literally merging the drive for AI, tech as it's going. And so no matter the course you are studying, there is an inculcation of what is happening outside. And with your EDC, why I'm using EDC is, let's not be sort of too big or vague to say have a lab. Institutions already have EDC, so it's simple to start from there. That's what I'm using. If not, if you go back in time and say when Hebron started, that's Covenant University's innovation lab, there were how many students came out? But now you can point to, say, Piggyverse founders, point to Thrive Agric and say they were once in Hebron lab.
Yeah.
And now I think they just recently did a program and there were like 3 or 4 that are currently getting funding from that. So it started with just one, and it's literally a growing community where you literally are now having students from CUs who are literally doing
actual
businesses and literally almost taking over the tech ecosystem. There's almost no media house, no tech that you won't see a CU person inside of it.
Yes, true.
And so that's change. That's the picture I would sell for the EDCs. Is don't do an innovation lab. Don't worry. Don't just start with your EDC, but change what it is now. And I guarantee you, in 4-5 years, you would have a thriving entrepreneurial ecosystem on campus, because students have where to go and play and fail on time. Because literally, you need that space where you can fail and your grade is not affected. And so if you have your EDC that is working, so say I come in 100 level and 200 level, I'm doing my entrepreneurial course and is on one innovation and I'm attached to that space and that's what we are learning, things will literally spring up from there.
True.
And would have the growth.
Thank you so much.
Thank you too.
Thank you so much, Mr. Gbenga Zaccheus.
Thank you for having me.
The Prof. This was a very interesting conversation. I really hope that anyone that listens to this, we have a better understanding of what's happening and how they can start to think about policy shift and how their EDCs will stop selling chin-chin and puff-puff.
Hopefully.
I'm looking forward to having you back because I think there's a lot more we could talk about, especially in your space. And thank you.
Thanks for having me. It's been a privilege.